Welcome everyone to the Club Officer Makeup Training. Today's training is on the secretary role, and we are very happy to have as our facilitator Seema Giri. She's an award-winning author, international speaker, transformational coach, and accomplished project management professional. She has co-authored The Authorities with New York Times bestselling authors Dr. John Gray from Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, Marcy Shimoff, and Raymond Aaron. Seema's extraordinary story of transforming her own life from being in chronic pain and bedridden to a successful entrepreneur is the inspiration behind her bold mission to teach others that it is possible to do the same. Seema empowers women who are sick and tired of living the confined, limited, and isolated life. She helps women to reject victimhood, tap into their inner power and self-compassion so that they can create the life of their dreams through her program, Break Free to Stand in Your Power. Help me welcome Seema Giri.
Thank you so much, Terry. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I'm sorry, what was that? Okay.
I'll go ahead and finish. I will go ahead and I'm going to mute for now.
Okay.
Our attendees.
Well, thank you, Terry, for that warm introduction, and I'm really happy to be here for the secretary makeup training. And I will go through the entire presentation. If we have any questions, feel free to ask towards the end. You might want to write down the question you have as we go along, and we'll get started. I would also like to mention that currently I am also the area director for Area D30, and I'm really excited to be leading the area this year. I'm also the secretary. My home club is Heart to Heart, and being in leadership is really amazing because you get to have a lot of personal growth while helping other people who have joined Toastmasters to improve their speaking. Okay, so today's agenda is going to be to understand what the secretary role is, understand the secretary responsibilities, and understand what the resources are. Today's training the purpose of it is for the secretaries to understand what their role in the Toastmasters Club is. And the session objective is to help you identify what your role is, how to fulfill your responsibilities, and find resources that help you. First of all, to give you an overview, you'll learn about your role within the club, and then identify the responsibilities of the role within the club meetings and the club executive committee meetings. And then we'll conclude by identifying what are the specific resources to help you fulfill your responsibilities. So, as a secretary, you have three responsibilities. Well, you have responsibilities within three areas. First is the club meeting. The second is outside the club meeting, and then the third is the executive committee. So the role before the club meeting is, during the club meetings, we'll discuss about your role before the club meetings, upon arrival at the club meetings, and during the club meetings. Before the club meeting, you want to post the previous minutes. And sometimes every club is different. Every club runs the secretary roles very differently. So you definitely want to post the previous minutes. Generally, what's a good practice is to send it out right after the club meeting or the executive meeting. And because there's going to be a lot of action items that you'll have listed there that you would want to have them completed before the next meeting. You want to prepare a list of actions for the president. There's a lot of list of actions that might come out from your your club meetings, and you want to make sure that your president has the latest list of actions. And the third thing that your role is, you as a secretary are supposed to do, is update the club officer list. Generally, this happens once a year, but some clubs do have voting twice a year. So you want to check how many times your club votes. And you want to update it in the club central location, where you'll update the person's name and their officer role. And this is one very simple thing to do that you want to do immediately, where you can gain points for your distinguished club points that you're supposed to make sure that you document. Not necessarily the secretary's role, but every club is different. So you want to see how your club does that. Upon arrival at the club meetings, you want to make sure that you have a guest book, and you want to circulate it at the beginning of the meeting. Generally, what I have seen most clubs have is there's a welcome table where people sign in. The members sign in, and there's a guest book there where you as a guest would also sign in, have other members that are coming to your club that are attending as a guest for the first time, have them sign in. And this does two things. One, that you have a record of all the people coming to your meetings, so then you can follow up with them. The VP of membership can follow up with them. And also it makes your guests feel warm and welcome. During the club meeting, you want to read the previous minutes, note any amendments on your agenda, and record the current meeting minutes. So what I have seen so far at all the meetings I've gone to, my own club and as well as other clubs that I have visited, there's barely any time to read the previous minutes of the meeting meeting. Generally, it's circulated within the club members right after the meeting, and anything important that is needed to reiterate in the next meeting is what you would reiterate. And then if there's any changes in the agenda, you want to make a note of that, because sometimes speakers who are supposed to speak don't come for certain reasons. They have a change of plans, they need to change that. Some of the roles might not have been fulfilled before, so most clubs do it right during the meeting. And in case someone is not able to show up for the meeting and their roles need to be assigned, so the assigned roles, the names may change, and you want to make sure that you have that down on there. Outside the club meeting, you want to make sure that you're maintaining an accurate roster of all the members. Now, this also depends on how your specific club does. Generally, the VP of membership in most clubs handle that aspect. So you'll notice as a secretary, you will be feeding into many roles and supporting them as well, with the president, with the VP of membership, with VP of education. So your role is actually very critical in keeping everyone apprised of the action items, because the action items will be required to be completed by the different officers. We already talked about that you would need to submit the club officer list, handle correspondence between Toastmasters International and your club. You would keep the club files updated and attend the club executive committee meetings. And we'll go over a little bit later on the responsibilities there. You also get to vote at the international business meetings. So secretary role is really important in that aspect. You need to understand how the other officers in your club would like to vote, and then make sure that is aligned with you as well, and vote accordingly. Now, if you're not able to go to the international business meetings like this last conference we had, I was not able to go, you get to assign a proxy to one of the trio members. So I had assigned my proxy to Kevin, and then he voted exactly as our club wanted to vote. You would also facilitate the member progress in base camp. So that means when people complete a certain education level in Pathways or the Legacy program, you would get to go and update that the particular member has completed that certain level in their program. Now, as I said before, it overlaps a lot with some of the other officers. Generally, in most cases, in most clubs, the VP of Education might be doing this, but every club has their roles divided, or it's a supporting role. So in case the VP of Education might not be available, then you would be able to facilitate that for the members. It's important to keep the members' momentum ongoing for the different education levels that they're in, so they can move along regularly. Because as of right now, in Pathways particularly, you can't move on to the next level unless your previous level has been approved. So that would be important. You would also arrange for your replacement or assistance. So when the year is coming to a closure, a few months before that, or maybe even now, you would want to look around to see who would be a good replacement for you for secretary role. It is a leadership role. It's a very important role that you would want to make sure that the person has the equal enthusiasm as you do to making sure that the club runs efficiently and effectively. Then you want to prepare your successor for the office as well. To give you an example at what we do in Heart to Heart, we do have a program called the Shadow Program. The Shadow Program is where people who are interested in fulfilling one of the 7 officer leadership roles can pair up with the current officers to see and learn what the role requires and what kind of work is needed. So they also help out with certain aspects of the role. For example, I have a person who is my shadow as a secretary. So in most of how we have divided, so he can understand what it looks like to be an office secretary officer, is during the club meetings, he takes the role of keeping the minutes for there. We have it very simple. We just basically follow the agenda, make the changes on there, and anything that's extraordinary for that meeting, it's not too much more detail. Some people that I know that I've trained the last couple of months have said that they really keep a very detailed minutes of the meeting during the club, where they mention, it's almost like a newsletter when it goes out. They mention interesting things for each of the speeches that were given, of table topics, memorable phrases, how many guests they had. And what they said was that this really kept people engaged, of members who were not able to attend the meetings and would be more enticed and inclined to come for the following meeting. So they really kept their meeting attendance high because of that. So that might be something you might want to think of the future. Sometimes they have special quotes. So really depending on your creativity, how much you want to put in, and what your club does as a practice is what you want to incorporate as well. So Now we're at the executive committee meeting. Here you want to read the previous meeting minutes, maybe some of the highlights. And here you have like an hour and a half, depending on each club, how often they meet. You would have the time to read the previous meeting minutes, or at least the highlights of what was discussed. You want to make any amendments to your agenda, and you probably would do this before the meeting. You would have the list of agenda. You want to make sure everything is added before that, and then before the start of the meeting, maybe just ask if there's anything else that needs to be added. And you would record your current meeting of the minutes. I generally use as a format one of the ready-made templates that's already in Word. You can use any template or create your own. That just helps keep things in order. It gives a format, and it's easy for people to see what are the agenda items, action items, and any special notes. If it's the same format, it's really easy for people to understand. One of the things that's really important, especially during the club meetings, to keep the details of who's speaking the speeches and the levels they're at, is because when you're completing the Outstanding Achievement Toastmasters template to see if you qualify for those, many people forget how many times they've still spoken, or if they've spoken a particular month or not, and they would come and ask you if you could tell them when they spoke last. So that is a really good resource for the members. And what I usually do is we also record our executive committee meeting. We do it over Zoom because everyone is everywhere. We record that, and I create the minutes of the meeting, the formal one, after the meeting right away, and I send it to everyone at the same time. Ask them if I've missed anything, and then send a final draft and save it on the Google Drive in one location where everyone can have access to it at a later date. And even we're probably going to open that aspect, the club meeting ones, to the members, so then they can easily go and refer to whatever they need to in case one of the officers is out. Then we just get it done and over with. If I wait for a couple of days to send it later, it gets missed. So that's one of my best practices that I want to pass on to you. So we've discussed, we've discussed how to fulfill. I can't see, this is blocking my view. So we've discussed how to fulfill the secretary responsibilities. We discussed how to do it, when, and then who and what. If we were in an in-person meeting, I would ask if there's any questions at this time. So I will ask that here. Does anyone have any questions right now? So between us here.
Muted. So Phyllis, if you have any questions. I have one question for you, Seema. Maybe it's more of a observation.
Sure.
You had mentioned part of the duties of a secretary are to read the minutes from the previous meeting. When I was secretary, I typically only did the minutes review for the executive meeting. So are you saying that it can also be done for the regular club meetings as well?
It can be, but I also mentioned that, the way we have a very jam-packed agenda, especially depending on how often the clubs meet. It might not be feasible, there might not be enough time to read the minutes, the meeting minutes from before. Because for a club especially like we meet once a month and we have a 3 hour, so we have sometimes 5 to 6 speakers. And to
Wow.
review all of that before there wouldn't be enough time. For the clubs, unless there's anything very specific, something important, which would be part of your current agenda anyhow, as part of any information that needs to be relayed to the members, I don't think there would be enough time to do that.
Now, how does
Great.
the
Thank you.
secretary become a base camp facilitator so that I can record everybody else's progress?
So your VP of Education can help you with that, but then also see if that's how, these are a guideline from Toastmasters International of what needs to be done. But remember, every club does things differently. Like in our club, the secretary does not facilitate on the base camp. VP of Education does that 100%. Okay. So if your club has that system, then you would talk to your VP of Education and they would set you up on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So let me ask you, what is the most important responsibilities you have as a secretary? Any guesses?
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
What is the most important responsibility as a secretary?
I personally think it's keeping the roster or submitting the officer list.
Okay, good. Phyllis, what do you think?
Keeping the minutes organized and your files organized.
Right. That's also a great answer. And then, of course, don't forget, you get to vote. You get to vote at the international business meetings. So you really have the pulse of the club, too. Okay. So, Terry, let me ask you, when will you fulfill, when will you submit the officer list, and how will you keep the rosters updated?
The rosters can be updated through Toastmasters International, through Club Central. And then the submission of the officer list, that's going to be in July and then again in December. And that can also be done through Toastmasters International website.
Right. And then Phyllis, how does your club currently keep the minutes of the meetings?
Well, we use the agenda, and I have a weekly format that I fill out, and I put down everybody's name that was there, their position, and who won best table topics, best evaluator, and best speaker. And if we had any guests, we put their names down and who invited them and things like that.
Okay. And then where, is there any special place you store the minutes of the meeting? Do you keep it in hard copy in files, or is it
We
online?
have a file. Yes, we have a file cabinet that we keep everything in, and
Okay,
we like it.
great.
If there's somebody that wants to know, well, when did I speak last? Well, I can go in, or they can go in to the cabinet and look and see, well, okay, I was here this day and I think I spoke this time, and they can pull it up and say, oh yeah, there I am, and they can see when they spoke.
Wonderful. Now, who is available to help you when you need help?
Anybody that is there can do this because it's simple. Anybody can do it because I wanted it to be made simple enough to where if I wasn't there, somebody else could take over.
Great. So if it's more specific to the secretary role, you can always get in touch with the person who was the secretary last. And then our good old friend Toastmasters
Yes.
International, you can either call them or search on Google or search on toastmastersinternational.org. They're pretty good resources for any information. I do the quick thing, and I generally just call Toastmasters International and get connected right away, and they help you out with whatever information you need. You also have your trios, right? Kevin, Beth, and Ashley, depending on what respective areas you need help with. Okay.
Yes.
So let's go over some checklists, some resources that is available to us. You want to, as you get started, you want to make sure you attend the district-sponsored club officer training program, like you are today. You want to read the materials. Now we have, if you type in, I just go on Google, you want the Club Leadership Handbook, which is item 1310. And you also want to get the Distinguished Club Program and Club Success Plan, which is item 1111. Now, this is a huge resource. It's many pages. So even if you look at the Distinguished Club report, that can give you a lot of information as well to see how your club is growing and doing. You want to make sure that you meet with the outgoing executive committee, the last officers who are going out, and see, what are the lessons learned? What went well? What worked well? What did not work well? Should there be any changes to any of the processes for any of the leadership positions? And then the new leadership, or you as a secretary, can incorporate what feels good to you and then how you want to grow. You definitely want to meet with the outgoing secretary. And again, you want to get a brain dump, lessons learned, what worked well, what did not work well, what they wish they could incorporate, and then maybe you can incorporate those things too. You want to see how you can help the club growing and how you want to support the members that are in it to move along their pathways or their educational plan that they are on. You also want to meet with the current executive committee. Now, with your current executive committee, you will have a set period where you will meet on a regular basis. Last year, our club used to meet once a quarter, and this year we're meeting every month for an hour and a half, because there's a lot more things we want to work on and implement this year. So that's an example of a change. As we discussed before, you want to confirm the submission of the newly elected officer list. Now, as a secretary, there's one thing that we need to put in immediately, and then that's to update officer list. To update any of these things, you can go to toastmastersinternational.org and go under Club Central and update the officer list there. And then you also need to review and order any needed materials. Every club keeps different things. You want to have brochure, you want to have the ribbons, you may want to have the pins, and see what's needed and order ahead of time. So here is a list of the resources that you would need. Everything is on toastmasters.org. You want to get the Distinguished Club Program plus SS plan, you just need to do /1111. Guest book, which is item 84. Your officer list, which is at Club Central. And use of materials, you want to go to members list on toastmasters.org. Now, if you don't have this or if you miss this, you can also just go to Google and type what you need, add Toastmasters to it, or go to toastmasters.org, and in the search button, you can put what you need. If you put in the secretary slides and secretary training, you'll also get those handbooks there too. Okay. Do we have any other questions at this point?
No. Thank you.
Okay. So that concludes our session for today for officer training for secretary. If we had more people, I would have done a few exercises, but we did a little bit. Terry, do you have any questions?
Nope, I'm going to stop the recording at this time, but please, participants, stay on.